When Epictetus spoke, he was not speaking as a man of privilege, but as one who knew the weight of chains. Born into slavery, he understood the raw, unpolished reality of life more than any philosopher who had studied in marble halls. His words carried the grit of survival and the clarity of one who had seen both power and helplessness. That is why his lessons still pierce through centuries with undiminished sharpness. They are not ornaments of thought, but weapons against despair, confusion, and weakness. If Marcus Aurelius was the emperor-philosopher, Epictetus was the slave who became a teacher, proving that wisdom is not chained to status. And so, when he laid down his principles, they were not theories, but shields and swords, meant for anyone who dared to live with strength of mind. The first principle he pressed upon his students was brutal in its simplicity. Know what is within your control and what is not. This is the foundation, the cornerstone upon which all else stands. A man who fails to see this truth is like a sailor who tries to command the wind rather than his sails. Epictetus would remind us that we cannot command the storms of fate, the cruelty of others, or the shifting circumstances of fortune. But we can command our own judgments, our own choices, our own actions. That is where freedom lives. Imagine a man imprisoned, beaten, ridiculed. Epictetus himself endured such conditions, yet within his mind he was untouchable. No tyrant can chain the will that has chosen to remain free, and so he urged his listeners to draw a sharp line in their minds. On one side, reputation, wealth, the opinions of strangers, the rise and fall of politics, the decay of the body, the outcome of battles, the weather itself, these are not ours. To cling to them is to live as a beggar of fortune, always pleading for what cannot be guaranteed. On the other side, our judgments, our intentions, our discipline, our desires. These belong to us entirely. If we lose sight of this distinction, life becomes torment. If we guard it, life becomes unbreakable. The second principle flows naturally from the first. Attach your happiness only to what is within your control. The moment you bind your peace of mind to things outside your power, you have surrendered yourself as a slave, even if you walk as a free man. Think of those who live in constant hunger for praise. Their joy is chained to the lips of others, and with a single word of criticism, they collapse. Epictetus would say, "Why grant your serenity to another's tongue? Why build your sense of worth upon foundations you cannot secure? Instead, place it upon your choices, your virtues, your discipline. If you rise each morning and act in alignment with reason and virtue, then you have succeeded, whether the world crowns you or curses you." It is easy to nod at this truth in silence, but far harder to live it in the heat of life. Imagine losing something dear, a home destroyed by fire, a possession stolen, a friend betraying you. The natural instinct is to rage at the world, to scream at fate. Yet Epictetus would whisper, "Did you ever truly own those things? Were they ever within your control? The house could burn, the friend could betray, the body could weaken. You never commanded them. The only thing that remained yours was the way you responded to their loss." That is the battlefield upon which true character is forged. And then comes a third principle, sharp and uncompromising. Suffer the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. The Stoic does not waste his life in wishing that winter were summer or that men were angels. He sees reality with the cold eyes of reason and accepts it, not as endorsement, but as acknowledgement. To wish the universe were other than it is to quarrel with the gods themselves. Epictetus taught that acceptance is not weakness, it is clarity. It is standing firm upon the ground of reality rather than drowning in fantasies. He would say, "Do not demand that events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do." This is not resignation, it is power. For once you cease to fight reality, your energy is freed to act with strength within the sphere of your control. Consider how much of our misery is born of this refusal to accept. A man laments that he grows old, but what else could he expect? Age is the law of nature. A woman weeps that light is unfair. But who promised fairness? The universe was not designed as a courtroom to balance our complaints. By insisting that reality bend to our desires, we exhaust ourselves in a war that cannot be won. Yet the moment we say, "It is so," a strange calm enters. Acceptance does not erase pain, but it removes the venom of resistance. You may still mourn, but you no longer curse the heavens. And from that posture, you can act with wisdom rather than with madness. These first principles form a foundation, distinguish control, bind happiness only to what is yours, and accept reality as it comes. Epictetus would not permit his students to move further without inscribing these into their souls. Without them, the rest of philosophy is like building a palace on sand. With them, even a life of poverty or pain can become a fortress of dignity. His voice still echoes through the centuries, not soft, not gentle, but stern as a father teaching sons how to stand in a storm. And if we listen, if we let these truths sink into the marrow of our bones, we may find that we are stronger than we ever dared believe. If the first movements of Epictetus's teaching were about clarity and acceptance, the next principles strike even deeper, demanding a transformation of how we value things, how we see our role in life, and how we endure the inevitable blows of fate. He never sought to comfort his students with illusions. He stripped illusions away. He believed that men suffer not from events themselves, but from the judgments they place upon them. And so, the fourth principle arises from this conviction. It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things. Imagine two men facing the same storm. One trembles, curses the sky, and declares the gods unjust. The other, though equally soaked and battered by wind, stands calm, unmoved in his core. The storm is the same. The difference lies in judgment. This is what Epictetus meant. When we decide that something is unbearable, it becomes so. When we label an insult as ruinous, it wounds us more deeply than the words themselves. But when we see events as simply events, neither good nor bad by nature, then we reclaim our freedom. What can truly harm the man who refuses to call himself harmed? Here lies one of the deepest sources of resilience. And this leads naturally into the fifth principle: train your desires and aversions, so they align in only with what you can control. Most men desire wealth, beauty, fame, or comfort. But these lie outside their grasp. And so, they live in endless frustration, their souls like dogs tied to carts, dragged unwillingly by events they cannot command. Epictetus would teach, desire virtue, and it is yours. Desire discipline, and it is yours. Desire justice, courage, moderation, wisdom. These belong entirely to you. No tyrant, no famine, no betrayal can strip them away. And for aversions, he warned, do not waste them on sickness, poverty, or death. These are not in your control. Instead, turn your aversion against injustice within yourself, against cowardice, against falsehood. That is where your power lies. This is not a gentle adjustment of the soul, but a radical reorientation. It is as if Epictetus were taking his students by the shoulders and turning them toward a new horizon. He demanded that they stop worshipping false idols, the glitter of wealth, the applause of crowds, the comforts of chance, and bow only to what reason and choice can govern. To live otherwise is to live in slavery, chasing shadows, cursing fate for the theft of things that were never ours to keep. Then comes the sixth principle, a principle of role and duty. Remember that you are an actor in a play written by another hand. Epictetus would remind his listeners that we do not choose our roles, we are cast into them. One man is a beggar, another is a ruler. One lives long, another dies young. These are not in our choosing. What is ours is to perform the role well. If you are cast as a soldier, then fight with honor. If you are cast as a servant, then serve with dignity. If you are cast as a cripple, then show the world that even in weakness there can be strength. This principle shatters pride and despair alike. It prevents us from boasting of our station or groaning endlessly about it. What matters is not the costume, but the performance. Many recoil from this idea, for it seems to diminish freedom. But in truth, it preserves it. The freedom of life is not in choosing your script, but in choosing how to embody it. A slave can be freer in spirit than a king who rages against his crown. And Epictetus himself proved it. He, once a slave, walked with more dignity than the masters who owned him. To see life as a play written by the gods is to find both humility and purpose. You cease asking, "Why me?" and instead ask, "How shall I play this part with excellence?" The seventh principle carries this further into the realm of suffering. Do not seek to avoid hardship, but to build the strength that hardship requires. Epictetus knew that pain, loss, insult, and death were unavoidable. The question was never whether they would come, but what kind of man you would be when they did. He urged his students to prepare in advance, to rehearse in the mind the losses that must come, not to brood in misery, but to strip them of their sting. When death takes a loved one, we should remember, "I knew he was mortal, I knew she was not mine to keep." When sickness strikes, we should say, "This too is part of the human script." In rehearsing hardships, we dull their surprise and sharpen our endurance. Epictetus would go so far as to say, "If you desire your life to be easy, you are desiring the impossible. But if you desire to be strong enough to endure whatever life sends, you desire what is within your power." He urged the practice of voluntary discomfort, training the mind and body to live with less than it craves so that when deprivation comes, it does not destroy us. Sleep on the ground when you have a bed, fast when you have food, walk in silence when you crave noise. These are not punishments, but rehearsals for life itself. And all of this comes together in the eighth principle. Freedom is found not in wealth, not in status, not even in safety, but in mastery of the self. Epictetus would thunder to his students that a man enslaved by his passions, his cravings, his fears, is no freer than a chained animal. You may see him wearing silk, riding in chariots, commanding armies, but if he cannot command his own tongue, his own desires, his own temper, he is a slave still. On the other hand, the beggar who governs himself, who refuses to be owned by anger or greed, is freer than any emperor. This vision of freedom is harsh, but luminous. It strips away the illusions of the marketplace and the court. It says, "You will not be free when the world bends to you. You will be free when nothing within you bends to the world." That is why Epictetus could look upon kings and not envy them, upon misfortune and not collapse. He had discovered the citadel within, a fortress no enemy could breach. And from this fortress he invited all men to live, not dependent on the trembling gifts of fortune, but on the unshakable strength of reason and virtue. The voice of Epictetus did not soften as he progressed through his teachings. Each principle pressed harder upon the soul, stripping away the excuses men invent to justify weakness. Having taught that freedom lies in the mastery of self and that hardship must be embraced rather than avoided, he moved forward to strike at the very heart of our daily conduct. His ninth principle is a weapon against one of the most destructive habits of the human race, the endless desire to control the opinions of others. Epictetus warned, "Do not waste your life trying to bend the thoughts of men to your favor." Think of how much energy is spent on reputation. A man decorates his house not because he loves it, but because he fears the judgment of visitors. A woman buys jewels not for joy, but for applause. Soldiers crave medals, not for courage itself, but for the recognition it brings. And all of this is bondage. Epictetus would remind us that the opinions of others belong entirely to them. Their praise and their insults are not ours to command. To live in constant hunger for approval is to hand your life over to strangers. If they smile, you rise. If they frown, you collapse. This is no life. Better to fix your eyes on virtue alone and let opinion come or go like wind across the sea. But this principle demands more than indifference. It demands courage. For to disregard opinion is to invite ridicule. to stand naked before the world without armor or flattery. Epictetus would say, "Let them laugh, let them scorn. If your conscience is clear, if your choices align with reason, then you have all the approval that matters." This is not arrogance, it is freedom. He urged his students to be prepared for mockery, for misunderstanding, for slander. These are not harms, he taught, but sounds. A man who trembles at words is a man who has forgotten where true power lies. Flowing from this is the 10th principle: guard your tongue and discipline your speech. For though we cannot control the mouths of others, we can control our own. Epictetus reminded his students that words are not trivial, they shape the soul. Gossip, idle talk, boasting, and complaint are poisons we drink willingly, unaware of the sickness they bring. He urged restraint, brevity, and honesty. Speak little, he said, and when you do speak, let it be with weight. A man who throws words carelessly is like a soldier who tosses weapons about, striking friend and foe alike. But the disciplined man uses words as a surgeon uses a blade, precisely, sparingly, to heal or to reveal truth. This principle strikes at our culture of noise. Even in ancient times, men crowded the streets with chatter, eager to discuss the scandals of the day, the movements of politicians, the latest spectacles in the arena. Epictetus refused such indulgence. He saw in idle speech the decay of discipline. A mind addicted to gossip is a mind unfit for philosophy. Better silence than empty noise. He would say, "Let others speak of games and banquets. You speak of virtue and reason, or remain silent." For silence itself is a form of strength, a guard upon the soul. From here, the teaching sharpens further into the 11th principle: distinguish between appearance and reality, and never be deceived by the glitter of the surface. Men mistake wealth for happiness, beauty for goodness, power for strength. But these are illusions. Epictetus would cut through them with the knife of reason. He would remind his students that wealth can corrupt, beauty can fade, and power can enslave. To chase them blindly is to run after shadows while neglecting the substance of the soul. How many are deceived by appearances? A man in purple robes is assumed wise, but he may be a fool. A poor man in rags is assumed base, but he may be noble in spirit. Epictetus demanded that his followers train their minds to look beyond the mask. Judge a man not by his possessions, but by his choices. Judge not by what he seems to have, but by how he bears what he has. In this lies the only true measure of worth. To be fooled by appearances is to live in chains, serving idols that vanish with time. But to see clearly is to walk in freedom, immune to deception. And then he drove this vision deeper, unveiling the 12th principle: prepare daily for death, for it is the one certainty that overshadows all others. Epictetus was relentless in reminding his students that they were mortals, that every day stolen from death was a gift to be used, not wasted. He urged them to meditate each morning. You may not see evening. You may not wake at dawn. This was not to terrify, but to sharpen. For a man who remembers death lives more fully. He wastes no hours in trivial pursuits, no days in vanity. He chooses with clarity, knowing that time is not a reservoir, but a flame, burning swiftly toward its end. Epictetus did not see death as evil. It is nothing more than a transition, part of the script assigned by the gods. To fear it is to misunderstand life itself. He would say, when you kiss your child, remember that he is mortal. When you shake a friend's hand, remember that it may be the last. Such reminders are not cruelty, but wisdom, for they teach us gratitude and restraint. The man who knows he will die does not boast, does not hoard, does not quarrel endlessly. He lives with dignity, treating each moment as a sacred trust. Finally, the 13th principle stands as a crown upon all the rest. Align your will with nature, and you will never be at war with the world. By nature, Epictetus meant not trees and rivers alone, but the entire order of the universe, the laws of reason, the flow of time, the structure of reality itself. To resist it is to be torn apart. To align with it is to find peace. When storms come, do not curse them, they are part of nature. When men act unjustly, do not expect perfection, it is in their nature to err. When death arrives, do not cry that it is unfair, it is in the nature of all that lives to die. The wise man ceases to wrestle with the inevitable and instead flows with it, like a swimmer who moves with the current rather than against it. This alignment does not mean passivity. It means acting with strength within the sphere of our power, while bowing in reverence to what life is beyond it. It means living in harmony with reason, treating others with justice, guarding oneself with discipline, and greeting fortune and misfortune alike with equanimity. In such a life, Epictetus promised, there is unbreakable peace. For the man who wills what the universe wills can never be defeated, for he has chosen to agree with fate itself. The principles of Epictetus are not ornaments for the mind, but tools for the soul. Taken together, they form not a list to be memorized, but a way to live, a fortress for the spirit when the world collapses around us. We have walked through them step by step, but Epictetus himself never meant them to be separated from one another. They are threads of a single fabric, and if one is torn, the whole garment weakens. To live as he taught is to weave them into daily practice until they become as natural as breathing. Imagine a man who forgets the first principle, who does not distinguish between what is in his control and what is not. Such a man will spend his days raging at storms, trembling at fate, enslaved by the behavior of others. His soul will be as restless as a boat tossed without anchor. But imagine another who remembers this principle. He knows that his peace depends only on his own judgments, and so he stands firm while others collapse. That single truth transforms existence. Yet it is not enough to know what is ours. We must also refuse to tie our happiness to what lies beyond us. This second principle strips the poison from desire. To crave only what is within your grasp is to walk unchained, to never again weep when fortune shifts. And from here follows the third, the command to accept reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. This alone rescues us from endless disappointment, for life is not obligated to meet our expectations. When we cease to quarrel with reality, we recover the strength to act wisely within it. The later principles sharpen the soul like steel against stone. To remember that it is not events themselves, but our opinions of them that wound us, is to reclaim mastery over pain. To train desire toward virtue and aversion toward vice is to place freedom back into our hands. To see ourselves as actors in a play written by the gods is to discover dignity in whatever role is given, whether great or small. And to rehearse hardship is to turn weakness into strength, to ensure that when suffering comes, it finds us prepared rather than broken. But Epictetus never allowed philosophy to drift into abstraction. He pressed his students on conduct. Do not crave the approval of men, for their opinions are not yours to command. Guard your tongue, for words shape not only others but yourself. Do not be deceived by appearances, for true worth lies not in robes, gold, or titles, but in the strength of the soul. In these commands, we see philosophy not as distant speculation, but as the daily discipline of the heart and mind. And then, always, he brought them back to the shadow that hovers over every life, death. To prepare for death is not to dwell in sorrow, but to strip away illusions. We do not have forever. Each morning is borrowed, each evening is a gift. A man who remembers this walks differently. He speaks with sincerity. He loves without clinging. He acts with urgency. He knows that time is precious, and so he does not waste it on trivialities. This is the wisdom that death gives to the living. At last, Epictetus crowns his teaching with the call to align our will with nature itself. This is the summit, the point where philosophy and life meet. To agree with the universe, to cease resisting what cannot be changed, is to find a peace that no storm can touch. This does not mean passivity, but harmony, to act with reason where we can, and to bow with reverence where we cannot. A man who lives this way is never at war with the world. He does not curse what is, for he has chosen to will what the universe itself wills. In this agreement with fate lies the deepest form of freedom. Taken together, these 13 principles are not merely the thoughts of a long-dead philosopher, they are instructions for every soul that longs for resilience, clarity, and peace. They ask us to see reality without illusions, to master ourselves rather than demand mastery over others, to seek freedom not in possessions but in discipline, to prepare for loss so that loss does not shatter us, to live each moment as if it were our last, and to align our hearts with the great order of existence. They ask much, but they give everything. Picture Epictetus himself, once a slave, later a teacher. He bore a lame leg from abuse. He had no wealth, no status, no family legacy, and yet he walked freer than kings. His voice carried not the weight of titles, but of truth. He taught emperors and beggars alike, and though centuries have passed, his lessons still cut to the bone. For human nature has not changed. We still rage at what is beyond us. We still crave what we cannot control. We still fear death. We still waste our lives chasing shadows. And so, his voice still matters. The question is not whether we admire these principles, but whether we live them. Epictetus would not care how many of his sayings we memorized. He would care only how we respond when insulted, how we act when fortune turns, how we face death when it arrives. Philosophy to him was never about words, it was about the shaping of the soul. To study Stoicism is not to become clever in speech, but strong in character. And if we can take these 13 principles into our marrow, if we can let them guide our days and nights, then we too can live as he lived, with freedom in chains, with peace in storms, with strength in weakness. That is the gift of Epictetus. His life proved his words, and his words, if we let them, can prove our lives. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. If the 13 principles of Epictetus form a ladder to inner freedom, then by this stage we are climbing toward heights where few are willing to go. The air becomes thinner, the demands heavier, the truths less comforting. Epictetus never promised ease, he promised strength. And strength is forged by stripping away what is false, by enduring what is necessary, and by living in accordance with reason, even when the world mocks or resists. Having shown us that freedom is not about wealth, power, or praise, but mastery of the self, he leads us deeper into the battlefield of daily life. This is where his principles cut most deeply. Consider again the principle that it is not events themselves, but our judgments of them that wound us. It is easy to admire this as a clever saying. It is another thing entirely to live it when humiliation strikes. Imagine being ridiculed publicly, your failures laid bare before a crowd. The instinct is to shrink, to burn with shame, to replay the moment endlessly in the prison of memory. But Epictetus would ask, what exactly was harmed? Was it your reason? Was it your virtue? Was it your ability to act with justice and courage? So the Stoic responds to criticism not with resentment but with gratitude. Only your opinion, that fragile story you tell yourself about how others must see you, was wounded. And if you have the courage to change that opinion, the wound vanishes. He would say, train yourself so that the insults of others fall upon you like raindrops on stone. You cannot stop the sky from weeping, but you can refuse to dissolve at every drop. This training is not about becoming cold or indifferent in the shallow sense. It is about learning to value rightly. If you value honor in the eyes of the crowd, you will forever tremble. But if you value the integrity of your own reason, then no insult can touch you. Thus, the battlefield is always within. This leads to another demand Epictetus placed upon his students to live with deliberate restraint, even in moments when indulgence seems harmless. The Stoic must guard not only against obvious vices, but also against the small cracks that grow into chasms. He would tell them to practice fasting, not because food was evil, but because dependence is. He urged them to endure cold, to accept discomfort, to step away from luxury. Not to parade as ascetics, but to train the will so that fortune could never enslave them. For a man accustomed to little fears, nothing in losing much. But the man accustomed to excess is a prisoner, trembling at the thought of deprivation. There is a quiet dignity in this practice. To sit at a table and refuse the richest dish, to walk when one could ride, to sleep on hard ground though a soft bed is near. These are not punishments but exercises, as vital for the soul as weights for the body. Epictetus knew that the time would come when hardship was not chosen but forced, and the man who has rehearsed it will greet it with calm, while the untrained collapses. Thus, each day offers opportunities for rehearsal, moments to prove that your happiness does not depend on the softness of pillows or the sweetness of wine. But perhaps one of his sternest lessons was this: stop pretending that life will wait for you. Too many, he said, live as though tomorrow is promised, as though virtue can be postponed. They say, I will live with discipline after this feast, after this season, after I have secured my fortune. But Epictetus thundered against such delay. You do not own tomorrow. Death may come tonight. What excuse will you give then, that you meant to live with dignity later? The time is always now. To postpone virtue is to betray it. This urgency is not morbid, it is liberation. For when you realize that every day could be the last, you no longer waste them in petty quarrels, in chasing what cannot be kept, in indulging weaknesses that only grow stronger by delay. Each morning becomes an arena, each choice a chance to prove the soul. And when evening comes, you can lie down without fear, for you have lived as a philosopher indeed, not only in thought. Epictetus also warned against a subtle but deadly trap, hypocrisy in philosophy. Many love to talk of Stoicism, to recite maxims, to debate principles. But when insulted, they rage. When fortune shifts, they panic. When death comes near, they tremble. Such men are like actors who speak lines but never embody the role. Epictetus demanded more. Do not merely speak of courage, be courageous. Do not merely admire justice, practice it when it costs you. Do not merely agree that death is natural, face it when it comes without shrinking. For the world has no need of philosophers who speak well but live poorly. The only proof of philosophy is in action. In this lies one of the most piercing lessons of his teaching. Philosophy is not a subject, but a way of being. You cannot study it from the safety of detachment. You must live it in blood and bone. Epictetus would scold his students when they left his lectures feeling clever but unchanged. Why do you come to me, he would ask, if you leave here the same as you arrived? My words are not meant to decorate your memory, but to transform your character. That is the demand of Stoicism, not entertainment, not intellectual pride, but the forging of souls. And so, the climb grows steeper. Each principle of Epictetus strips away another illusion, another comfort, another excuse. He does not promise that by following him, life will become easy or pleasant. He promises that it will become unbreakable. He promises that you will no longer be a slave to fear, to craving, to the noise of the crowd, to the uncertainty of fate. He promises that you will live as a free soul in a world of chains, but only if you dare to take his words not as quotations for your tongue, but as laws for your life. If the 13 principles of Epictetus form a ladder to inner freedom, then by this stage we are climbing toward heights where few are willing to go. The air becomes thinner, the demands heavier, the truths less comforting. Epictetus never promised ease. He promised strength. And strength is forged by stripping away what is false, by enduring what is necessary, and by living in accordance with reason, even when the world mocks or resists. Having shown us that freedom is not about wealth, power, or praise, but mastery of the self, he leads us deeper into the battlefield of daily life. This is where his principles cut most deeply. Consider again the principle that it is not events themselves, but our judgments of them that wound us. It is easy to admire this as a clever saying. It is another thing entirely to live it when humiliation strikes. Imagine being ridiculed publicly, your failures laid bare before a crowd. The instinct is to shrink, to burn with shame, to replay the moment endlessly in the prison of memory. But Epictetus would ask, what exactly was harmed? Was it your reason? Was it your virtue? Was it your ability to act with justice and courage? Even an emperor, he realized, needed critics as guards. Only your opinion, that fragile story you tell yourself about how others must see you, was wounded. And if you have the courage to change that opinion, the wound vanishes. He would say, train yourself so that the insults of others fall upon you like raindrops on stone. You cannot stop the sky from weeping, but you can refuse to dissolve at every drop. This training is not about becoming cold or indifferent in the shallow sense. It is about learning to value rightly. If you value honor in the eyes of the crowd, you will forever tremble. But if you value the integrity of your own reason, then no insult can touch you. Thus, the battlefield is always within. This leads to another demand. Epictetus placed upon his students to live with deliberate restraint, even in moments when indulgence seems harmless. The Stoic must guard not only against obvious vices, but also against the small cracks that grow into chasms. He would tell them to practice fasting not because food was evil, but because dependence is. He urged them to endure cold, to accept discomfort, to step away from luxury. Not to parade as ascetics, but to train the will so that fortune could never enslave them. For a man accustomed to little fears, nothing in losing much. But a man accustomed to excess is a prisoner, trembling at the thought of deprivation. There is a quiet dignity in this practice. To sit at a table and refuse the richest dish, to walk when one could ride, to sleep on hard ground though a soft bed is near. These are not punishments, but exercises, as vital for the soul as weights for the body. Epictetus knew that the time would come when hardship was not chosen, but forced. And the man who has rehearsed it will greet it with calm, while the untrained collapses. Thus, each day offers opportunities for rehearsal, moments to prove that your happiness does not depend on the softness of pillows or the sweetness of wine. But perhaps one of his sternest lessons was this: stop pretending that life will wait for you. Too many, he said, live as though tomorrow is promised, as though virtue can be postponed. They say, I will live with discipline after this feast, after this season, after I have secured my fortune. But Epictetus thundered against such delay. You do not own tomorrow. Death may come tonight. What excuse will you give then that you meant to live with dignity later? The time is always now. To postpone virtue is to betray it. This urgency is not morbid, it is liberation. For when you realize that every day could be the last, you no longer waste them in petty quarrels, in chasing what cannot be kept, in indulging weaknesses that only grow stronger by delay. Each morning becomes an arena, each choice a chance to prove the soul. And when evening comes, you can lie down without fear, for you have lived as a philosopher in deed, not only in thought. Epictetus also warned against the subtle but deadly trap, hypocrisy in philosophy. Many love to talk of Stoicism, to recite maxims, to debate principles. But when insulted, they rage. When fortune shifts, they panic. When death comes near, they tremble. Such men are like actors who speak lines but never embody the role. Epictetus demanded more. Do not merely speak of courage, be courageous. Do not merely admire justice, practice it when it costs you. Do not merely agree that death is natural, face it when it comes without shrinking. For the world has no need of philosophers who speak well but live poorly. The only proof of philosophy is in action. In this lies one of the most piercing lessons of his teaching. Philosophy is not a subject, but a way of being. You cannot study it from the safety of detachment, you must live it in blood and bone. Epictetus would scold his students when they left his lectures feeling clever but unchanged. "Why do you come to me," he would ask, "if you leave here the same as you arrived? My words are not meant to decorate your memory, but to transform your character." That is the demand of Stoicism, not entertainment, not intellectual pride, but the forging of souls. And so, the climb grows steeper. Each principle of Epictetus strips away another illusion, another comfort, another excuse. He does not promise that by following him, life will become easy or pleasant. He promises that it will become unbreakable. He promises that you will no longer be a slave to fear, to craving, to the noise of the crowd, to the uncertainty of fate. He promises that you will live as a free soul in a world of chains. But only if you dare to take his words, not as quotations for your tongue, but as laws for your life. Epictetus never let his students escape into theory. He pulled them down from lofty speculation into the dust and mud of human life. Philosophy was not for the lecture hall alone, but for the marketplace, the household, the battlefield, the prison. If it did not hold when fortune struck its hardest blows, then it was no philosophy at all. And so his teachings in these later principles demanded that men test themselves constantly, that they prove their convictions not by eloquence, but by conduct. One of the most difficult truths he impressed was the discipline of desire. He told his students bluntly, "If you desire what is not yours to command, you will be disappointed. If you avoid what is not yours to avoid, you will suffer. But if you fix your desire only upon what lies in your power, you will never fail." This sounds simple, but in practice it tears at the heart. For who among us does not desire the love of another, the loyalty of friends, the success of our efforts, the security of wealth? And yet, all of these hover beyond our control. A lover may leave, a friend may betray, efforts may collapse, wealth may vanish overnight. To build happiness upon them is to build a fortress of straw in the path of fire. Epictetus demanded that we train our desires like soldiers. Let them march only where victory is possible. Desire to act with courage, and no man can rob you of success. Desire to speak truth, and you need no audience. Desire to live justly, and even if the world mocks you, you have triumphed. When your desires are properly trained, frustration vanishes, for you no longer chase what can never be secured. Instead, you feast daily on victories of the soul, small but unbreakable. This discipline is mirrored by the training of aversion. Men fear poverty, sickness, and death. But Epictetus called these shadows. They are inevitable parts of the play, not monsters to be fled. He urged his students, "Reserve your fear for the only true evils: cowardice, falsehood, injustice, and intemperance. These alone can rot the soul, and these alone lie within our power to avoid." Thus, the man who dreads poverty is already poor, for he has surrendered peace to a phantom. But the man who dreads vice alone is rich in spirit, even if clothed in rags. This radical reordering of values is one of the hardest tasks Epictetus set before his students, for it forces the soul to stop pretending. We cling to illusions because they comfort us. We want to believe that money guarantees safety, that health is within our command, that reputation secures respect. But when these collapse, as they always do, our illusion becomes torment. Epictetus tore the veil and said, "Face the truth and you will be free. Let go of what is not yours. Cling only to what is, and no force on earth can enslave you." Yet even as he spoke of discipline, he warned against cruelty toward oneself. Restraint does not mean self-hatred. Endurance does not mean despair. Epictetus urged moderation even in austerity. Train yourself, yes, but do not flaunt it. Sleep on the ground to test your strength, but do not boast of it to others. Refuse luxuries to discipline your desires, but do not scorn those who accept them. The Stoic does not seek applause for hardship, he seeks only mastery of the will. To parade one's discipline is to trade one form of slavery for another, the slavery of vanity. There is a subtle beauty here. Epictetus taught that true strength is silent, invisible to all but the one who possesses it. The man who fasts in private, who endures cold without announcement, who forgives insult without demand for recognition, this man is strong. His victories are invisible but indestructible. No thief can steal them, no crowd can corrupt them, no tyrant can suppress them. They belong entirely to him, and in that possession lies the only freedom worth having. But his teaching did not stop at the personal level. Epictetus insisted that philosophy must shape how we treat others. He urged his students to remember constantly that other people are bound by the same illusions, the same weaknesses, the same chains. They will rage, gossip, betray, and wound, not because they are monsters, but because they are ignorant of truth. To be angry at them is as foolish as to be angry at a blind man for stumbling into you. Epictetus would say, when insulted, remember that the one who insults is misguided, a prisoner of false values. Pity him, correct him if possible, but do not hate him, for hatred poisons the soul more than the insult itself. This does not mean tolerating injustice without resistance. It means resisting without surrendering your own virtue. If a man strikes you, you may restrain him. If a ruler oppresses, you may oppose him. But never let anger command you. Never let bitterness corrupt you. To fight injustice with injustice is to lose before the battle begins. Epictetus demanded a higher kind of warfare, to fight vice with virtue, to answer cruelty with dignity, to resist corruption without becoming corrupt yourself. This is perhaps one of the most demanding aspects of his philosophy. For it is easy to act justly when treated justly, to speak kindly when spoken to kindly, to remain calm when life flows smoothly. But philosophy is tested at the breaking point. Epictetus would ask, what use is your wisdom if it vanishes at the first insult? What good is your courage if it collapses in the face of pain? What worth is your discipline if it dissolves at the sight of luxury? Philosophy that fails in hardship is no philosophy at all. The true Stoic shows his mettle when all else falls apart. And so the demands mount higher. You must discipline your desires, train your fears, endure hardship, and treat others not as enemies but as fellow prisoners in the same human condition. You must rehearse death, embrace reality, reject illusions, and align your will with nature itself. This is not the way of comfort. It is the way of steel. But it is also the way of freedom. For while the masses are tossed about like leaves in the wind, the Stoic walks as a man, grounded, unshaken, at peace. Epictetus never spoke as a man chasing admiration. His words were not designed to please ears, but to pierce hearts. He knew that philosophy is useless unless it reshapes life itself, unless it steels the soul against the cruelties of fortune and the weakness within. That is why his 13 principles remain timeless, not as abstract teachings to be quoted, but as disciplines to be lived. And if we gather them all now, holding them together in our hands, we can see the architecture of a life unshakable by storm, unbroken by loss, undefeated even in death. The first foundation is clarity, to know what is in your control and what is not. Without this, you will forever rage against the wind, a prisoner of illusions. The second is to tie your happiness only to what is truly yours, your choices, your judgments, your virtue. The third is to accept reality as it is, not as you wish it to be, so that you cease fighting unwinnable battles. The principles grow sterner as they rise. Rehearse hardship so that loss does not destroy you. Seek freedom, not in wealth or safety, but in mastery of the self. Do not waste your life chasing the opinions of others, nor let your own tongue enslave you through careless words. See beyond appearances, remembering that virtue alone is true wealth. Prepare daily for death, for only in the shadow of mortality can you see life clearly. And finally, align your will with the order of nature so that you live in harmony with reality rather than at war with it. Taken together, these are not 13 separate rules, but one living philosophy, the art of freedom. Freedom from fear, from craving, from dependence, from despair. Freedom to live with dignity, no matter what chains bind the body. Epictetus proved this with his own life. Though born a slave, though lame in body, though poor in possessions, he was freer than emperors who trembled at every whisper of fortune. His chains could bind his limbs, but never his will. He discovered the fortress within, and there he lived unassailable. The question that remains is not whether these principles are admirable, but whether we dare to live them, for they demand everything. They demand that we stop blaming others for our misery, that we abandon illusions of control, that we face death without trembling, that we cut the chains of reputation and wealth, that we live with gratitude for what is rather than bitterness for what is not. They demand silence when complaint would be easy, forgiveness when anger would be sweet, courage when cowardice would be safer. They demand that philosophy not remain on our lips, but take root in our marrow. This is not the path of comfort. It is the path of steel. It is the road of men and women who refuse to be owned by their fears or their cravings. It is the way of those who would rather walk free in rags than bow as slaves in silk. It is the discipline of the soul that does not collapse when insulted, that does not break when fortune shifts, that does not despair when death comes. Such a soul lives already in victory because it has conquered itself. And perhaps this is why the teachings of Epictetus strike us so deeply today. For though the centuries have passed, human weakness has not changed. We still chase approval, wealth, and pleasure as though they could save us. We still tremble at sickness, poverty, and death as though they were true evils. We still complain, gossip, and waste our lives on trivialities. We are still slaves in gilded cages, mistaking noise for freedom. But Epictetus offers us a way out, not by changing the world, but by changing ourselves. Not by demanding softer chains, but by discovering the place within where no chain can reach. If you would live free, begin here. Take one principle, live it today. Refuse to complain. Accept what is beyond you. Speak less, but with weight. Prepare for death and live as though each hour were your last. Align your will with nature, and you will cease to be torn apart by its course. Begin now, for tomorrow is not yours. Step by step, choice by choice, you will discover that philosophy is not ancient dust, but living fire. And when storms come, as they surely will, you will stand as Epictetus stood, calm, resolute, untouchable. In the end, his teaching can be summed in a single challenge. Do not explain philosophy, embody it. Do not praise wisdom, be wise. Do not speak of freedom, live free. For words fade, but a life lived in truth echoes forever. And if you walk this path, then though you die as all men do, you will die undefeated, for no chain will have ever bound your soul.